You've built a whole world for your players to explore and try to save. But what is that worth when there's no baddies? No one who threatens it in the first place? That's where factions come in. Because most villains don't just work only by themselves, but are assisted by minions that can serve as cannon fodder in fights, and lieutenants that they can interact with and try to negotiate with, try to bargain peace with during a battle or something. We'll go over all the major steps that you can take to build up your own factions, while I'll build up an example with my Arcane RPG world, starting with the lead NPC. Every faction you create needs a leader, someone that the characters can either antagonize as the villain, or they can look up to if that's the faction that they're a part of. Could be their leader, could be the person that they directly get their quests from, or it could also be someone at the very tip top that they don't really see but hear the influence of. Or maybe they could even be the leaders of their own faction. Who knows? This leading NPC needs to be really worked out in comparison to everyone else that the players will meet. They'll be what keeps the players engaged with that group of NPCs, be they villains or something else. As an example, if I'd make Zon into a faction, Silco would be the main NPC for that faction. Throughout play, characters should constantly be warned of him if they were to work for Piltover, but if they work for Zon, he'd be the one they get orders from and with who they get in trouble if they mess things up. Secondly, factions have plans and motivations. They need to have something that the characters know that this faction is building towards, or just see them building towards some type of goal, even if they don't really know what that specifically is. There can be reports of heists in the city, important figures being killed, or even something as simple as seeing a bigger amount of enforcers on the streets in a certain district, in the case of Piltover and Zon. This reminds everyone at the table that this world lives and breathes and doesn't stop when they quit following a plotline. What you can do as a DM even before a side quest or quest starts around that faction, or before players are introduced to that faction as a whole, they can see the influence of that faction on the streets through their plans and motivations. Something else to keep in mind is that those plans and motivations are most of the time directly connected to the lead NPC. Most of the time, the faction is doing the exact thing that lead NPC wants, but sometimes things can be a bit more complicated than that and a bit more interesting than that. If we look over to Piltover as a faction, the lead NPC, who would be the head of the council, doesn't have a direct say in what the faction does, which could make for a very interesting power struggle within the faction itself. Then the last thing your faction needs is a headquarters. If the players can pinpoint your faction on a map, it'll feel way more tangible. The players know that they can confront Silco by heading down to the last drop. But is that something that they want to do? Some rapid fire tips as I'm running out of time. You could also try to consider the general relation to the populace. How is your faction regarded? Good, bad? Do normal people even know that this faction exists? Then who are the underlings of your faction? By underlings, I mean who does the jobs for this faction. Could be enforcers on the streets, low lives in kind of the slums, could be nobles in courts. Possibilities are endless. Maybe the last one is, how do they fight? Do they need warrants to enter homes and perform arrests, or do they take people out one by poisoning them? I know I said that I'd be doing war, but that's something that we'll have to leave for next episode, because that's all for now. See ya!